现在我们还继续讨论平等的问题，但是我觉得平等问题最有影响力的是什么？就是讲男女平等。20世纪之前不可能有这样的，我们的课有应该是50%多的学生是女生，对不对？100年前不可能，不管是什么国家，不可能有这样的现象，因为大部分的学者都觉得男女不平等。现在，当然大部分的学者觉得男女平等，不可能说女性没有那么理性，所以不应该给他们平等的机会来学习，对不对？包括科举的制度，当时就是当然是很平等的制度，但是女性没有办法参加，对不对？现在高考好像有时候女性比男性考得更好，是吗？反正没有人会说因为女性所以不应该给他们权利来参加高考的制度。为什么有这样的变化？很多理由，但是很重要的理由就是因为哲学家的讨论。哲学家尤其是西方的哲学家有2500年的历史都在讨论男女平等的问题，然后我们会看为什么。我们很少可以说这个人错了。我们现在看 Aristotle 亚里士多的思想，我们觉得这份完全是不对。所以我有时候政治哲学还是有进步有退步。我觉得讨论男女平等的问题一定有进步。所以我们先看一些历史，我们说古典主要是20世纪之前的一些争论，然后我们可以看一些当代的争论，好吗？第一个问题是 feminism， 怎么分 feminism？ 有的人说是女性主义，我在清华的时候，学生跟我说不，应该是女权主义。你们觉得应该怎么翻译 feminism？ 有看法吗？女性主义还是女权主义？如果我以前不问你这个问题，你会怎么翻译 feminism？
女性。
为什么？
因为我觉得女性主义是一个比较中性。
对，中性的。而且现在 feminism 包括很多争论，包括关怀伦理。关怀伦理英文是 care ethics。care ethics 跟权利没有直接的关系。care ethics 主要是讲 how we learn about justice and about morality。这些 care ethics 的学者，他们觉得是在家庭学。We learn about ethics and morality in the family。我们会觉得这方面，我们可以说中国哲学比较现代化。当然，儒家一直在说我们在家庭可以学怎么道德的问题，对不对？但是西方的学者20世纪之前都觉得是家庭之外学的。但是有一些女性主义 feminism 的学者，他们觉得 no， we learn about ethics within the family。 So 当然feminism 包括一些 power 权利 rights 的问题，但是也包括一些 care ethics 的问题。所以我觉得翻译成女性主义是一方面比较 neutral 比较中立，另一方面it's a more encompassing 包括很多不同的争论。所以我觉得我们还是可以翻译女性主义，好吗？而且有一些我们会看，我们刚才讨论是 Rawls 的思想。Rawls 的思想很多女性主义者批评 Rawls， 为什么呢？因为 Rawls 都觉得这个怎么分配资源的问题都是国家的问题，也有人说是国际的问题。但是女性主义者觉得也是家庭的问题。如果我们不解决在家庭男女平等的问题，不可能家庭之外解决。 男女平等的问题，对不对？如果我的爱人都是他洗碗做饭管家庭的事，然后他也想在家庭之外发展，但是你觉得他有平等的机会？不可能，对不对？因为他很忙，没有时间搞家庭之外的问题。所以好像我已经说了，对不对？为什么上海我们很多人觉得是在中国是最反正对女性最友好的城市呢？主要是因为男的愿意多做一些家务，包括洗碗、做饭等等，所以家庭之外都有平等的机会。所以很多女性主义者，包括 Susan Moller Okin， 很优秀的学者，很伟大的学者，她去世了几年前。她一方面她批评 Rawls 的思想，另一方面他会讲自己的理论。所以我们讲当代女性主义，主要是按照 Susan Moller Okin 的思想来考虑问题。但是我们先讲classical feminism 女性主义古典的一些争论，好吗？So let me switch to English now. Well, these arguments, of course, they're written in ancient Greek, but I learned about them in English, so let me pursue these arguments in English. These arguments started over 2,500 years ago between Plato and his student, Aristotle. Plato's most famous book is The Republic, 理想国. And it's a very famous, for many different reasons, very original. But one very important reason is that he argued that men and women should have equal opportunity to be soldiers and to be rulers of the community. In his day, it was a very original argument. 说实话，古代中国没有人会讲这些话，对不对？但是2500年前，在古希腊已经有学者在讨论这些问题。当然，他没有成功，但是我们要看，就是没有成功 ，meaning he was not successful in his ideas were not very successful in influencing the reality in his day, but his ideas were very influential about 2,500 years later. We know. His ideas, he was more or less right. Sometimes it takes a long time to be proven right? I mean, 孔子他500年以后才会有一些社会的影响。这个 Plato 2500年以后才会有一些社会的影响。What are his arguments for women's equality? Why does he say that women and men should have equal opportunity, first to join the military, and then to join the ruling class? Why did he say that? It was a very original, a very strange argument in his own day. And he said there were 3 reasons for that. One, the standards change over time, right? 在不同的时代有不同的标准. This is, of course, now we look at history, and of course we see that. In those days, we thought women were inferior. Now we don't think so. Obviously, things change. In his own day, he couldn't use that example because there was no society where women were treated as equals. Although arguably, Sparta, rather than Athens, a non-democratic Sparta, was more equal in terms of treatment of women than Athens. But anyway, the example he gave is this. He said, when we serve in the military, now, 我们当军人, we all think everybody, the best way to be a soldier is to be naked. You know, 就是裸不穿衣服，这是最效率最高的军人。And he said, well, now we know that, but of course, 100 years ago, people thought you had to wear clothes to be a good soldier. Now, he says, now we know, actually no. By being naked, you can be a good soldier. Of course, now we think, actually, you don't have to be naked to be a good soldier. But his point is that in different times, we have different ideas about morality. Now, we think that women are inferior, but maybe in the future, we will have different views. A very interesting argument. Second argument was that he says, when you choose somebody for a position in work, if you want to choose the best teacher, or the best scientist, or the best artist, it all depends on ability, right? 按照能力来分配，对不对？ Not because of the body. You can't say because you have a female body, you can't be a good teacher. I mean, that's a ridiculous argument. You can't say because you have a female body, you can't be a good artist. The only way of deciding who can be a good teacher is somebody who has the ability to teach well, right? So he says we shouldn't discriminate against people on the basis of their body when it comes to selecting people for positions, including positions in the military. If you want to choose a good soldier, you choose somebody who has the ability to be a good soldier. It doesn't depend on their body, right? 中国的军训，你们分的男女有你们分的吗？你们不分 ？Okay. Anyway, so that's his view. 我们要选一些统治者，应该用什么标准？谁有能力当统治者，对不对？跟身体没有关系。So if you want to choose a person for a position, all that matters is the person's ability to do the work well. Their body is irrelevant. This was his second argument. The third argument is very influential, as we'll see. Utilitarian thinkers, 功利主义者, picked up, they used the same argument. If half of the community, i.e., if women who represent 50% of the people are not being allowed to develop their talents, you're wasting the talent of half of the community. How can the community develop? Well, if half of the people are being suppressed and cannot develop their talents. And again, it seems like an obvious argument now, but it was an original argument in his day. And maybe I'm wrong, but even in the thinkers in the Chinese tradition, like Mo Tzu, didn't make that argument. But they should have, according to their own principles, right? But they didn't develop that argument. So, these are the three arguments he made for why women should be equals when it comes to being soldiers and being ruling members of the community, or guardians, as he put it. Well, his student Aristotle disagreed. And in his day, people thought that Aristotle won the debate. What were Aristotle's arguments against his own teacher? He said, women are the natural inferiors of men, okay? 女性天生比男性次等. That's his argument. It seems like a strange argument, and it is a strange argument. He also made an argument that some people are born naturally deserve to be slaves. But that was a dominant view in his day. Why did he say this? Two reasons. Women are less rational than men. 他们不够理性. So, 因为他们不够理性，我们希望公民，我们希望统治者是最理性的人。女性不够理性，所以女性不应该有平等的机会。女性不应该当公民或者统治者。 Women should be confined to the family. 因为女性没有那么理性，所以她们应该在家庭，不应该给她们家庭之外的机会或者工作。Okay? And even within the family, 在家庭之内，他们也不应该当反正不应该给他们平等的权利。They should not have equal rights within the family, because in the family you have to decide who will be the ruler in the family. That was his view. And we should choose the most rational person in the family to be the ruler. Who is the most rational person? Well, by definition, he said, men are more rational, therefore the father or the husband should be the ruler of the family. So women, here's the family, here's society. So women should be confined within the family, and within the family they should not be the rulers either. So women should be permanently confined to the family, and within the family they should not have the right to be the dominant person. That was his argument. This was the standard view for almost 2,500 years in the Western societies, and also to a certain extent in Chinese societies. But here, 这个是比较有意思。中国学者，包括孔子、孟子，没有说女性天生比男性次等。There's not this. They never said that women are the natural inferiors of men. So in this sense, the Chinese philosophies were, ahead, more enlightened than the ancient Greek philosophers. Than Aristotle anyway. And this argument from Aristotle had huge influence through almost all of Western history, including the great thinkers in the liberal tradition. 自由主义者理论上应该说大家都平等，但是他们觉得20世纪之前的自由主义者大部分都觉得不行，女性还是不够理性。So Hobbes famously said that everybody should be treated as an equal, and then they should choose the kind of government that they want. Everybody agrees on the importance of the right to life. Therefore, they should choose a form of government that protects the right to life. But is it really an individual who chooses? No. It's the male head of the family. Okay? So people said, 自由主义者太个人主义。一方面可以说是其实不够个人主义，因为他们觉得还是按照家庭，而且还是按照男性来决定，女性没有平等的权利来决定他们需要什么样的政府。Okay? John Locke. Wow, beautiful. John Locke, liberal, right? Right to life, right to liberty, right to property. Does he really treat everybody equally? She did a beautiful book on the liberals. No. John Locke too. He said, there is a foundation in nature for the rule of the husband as the abler and the stronger. An argument straight from Aristotle, adopted in an almost unquestioned way. These are the great early liberal thinkers who were very, 淡男人主义, patriarchal, okay, in their beliefs, in an almost unquestioned way. Even in the French tradition, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a beautiful believer in equality everybody in all sorts of situations should be treated as equals. And the best form of government is one that provides equal rights to all and that allows all to participate in government. But is it really equal? No. It's equality between men. Women are basically excluded. This is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The one should be active and strong. Who's the one? The man, right? The other should be passive. That's the woman, 被动, and weak. It is necessary that the man should have the power and the will, and that the other should make little resistance. 意思是说，女性要听男性的话，男性说了算。This principle being established, it follows that the woman is expressly formed to please the man, okay? This is very strong prejudice, straight from Aristotle, had huge influence in Western political theory. Actually, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, if you read his work called The Confessions, 我不知道你们读过没有，中文怎么说 Confessions？ 你们读过吗？卢梭的，你读过吗？那他对女性有什么看法在这本书？Well, basically, it's much more nuanced. He had many strong and capable women in this book who he treats with great deal of respect, actually. But in his theory, that was not influential. In his own life, he was much more kind and friendly and respectful of women. But in his theory, not at all. Well, I should say not always. He had, I think, 5 babies with a kind of 一种保姆, and then he abandoned all those babies to an orphanage. But anyway, there's a gap between his theory and his life. It all started to change when a great female philosopher challenged all these assumptions. Her name was Mary Wollstonecraft, and she was a hugely important and original philosopher from England who had a great deal of influence on the development of feminist theory in the West. 应该有中文版，可能你们没有读过他的书嘛？我觉得应该有中文版，我不知道有没有。John Stuart Mill, we discussed him too, heavily influenced by his brilliant wife, Harriet Taylor, also in the 19th century developed arguments for equality between men and women. And that challenged the traditional view, and eventually that argument won the day. So here we have to say, 所谓的, 为什么 Mill, why does he value eccentrics and non-mainstream views, 非主流的思想，它为什么那么重要？因为当时可能大家都觉得是非主流的思想，但是100年以后，这个非主流的思想会变成主流的思想。所以我们有一些非主流的思想，不要马上觉得这个是不对，主要是 Mill 的理论 ，OK？ Now, what exactly were the arguments by Mary Wollstonecraft? Why men and women should be equal? Well, she said, look at babies. Is there a difference in babies between boys and girls? 有没有区别吗？你们有经验吗？你们看这个1岁的小孩，男孩、女孩有区别吗？基本上没有，对不对？所以为什么长大以后有区别呢？完全是因为教育的不同的区别，不是因为是 主要是因为不同的培养，对不对？而不是因为there's a foundation in nature, right? As John Locke put it. So if you look at the differences between boys and girls, when they're very young, there's no difference, right? If you give a truck, a doll to a baby boy, he will like it too, usually, right? Or if you give a little car to a baby girl, she will like it too. But because eventually the mother or father thinks the doll should be given to the girl and the car should be given to the boy, eventually these differences develop. It has to do with education and nurture, not with nature. 我不知道你们小的时候喜欢跟小汽车玩吗？有经验吗？可能没有，是吗？我小的时候我也没有跟这些很可爱的东西玩，我有一点后悔。Anyway, women's education is not meant to cultivate their reason. The way she's writing here in the 18th century, right? 200多年前. She said, if you look at the women are educated, it is not meant to develop their reason. She was an exception because her father strongly believed in raising her to be and to develop her reason. But in most cases, women are not educated to be rational. So of course you say, women are not as rational as men. Yeah, in those days. Why? Well, obviously, because they were not educated to be rational, right? 包括在中国古代，对不对？女性没有办法发展，所以当然我们不可以，所以当然女性没有平等的机会，所以我们也发现有问题，对不对？ Another interesting thing, this is a very interesting argument. She says, look at men when they develop. Sometimes they have traits that are supposed to be female traits. 尤其是一些 soldiers, 士兵们 or 军人, right? What's the main trait? 你们军训最重要的道德是什么？听话，对不对？ You have to obey. 盲目服从, that's the main trait of a soldier, and that's the one, and men are supposed to be soldiers, but it turns out that this trait that is supposed to be distinctive to women, obedience, right? That's what Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, right? Remember? Women are the ones who obey. Well, you say men are supposed to be soldiers, and they're the ones who obey. What's going on here? Something is strange, right? So she had these very original arguments for why women and men should be equal, and she explains why there's inequality now. If you remove the difference in education, if you allow women to develop their reason, then women and men should be the same when it comes to rationality. Now, Mill made another argument. In the 19th century, people came to the conclusion that slavery, 奴隶制, the slavery system was unjust. And of course, that is a correct argument, right? 现在没有人会说奴隶制是正义的，对不对？我们都觉得奴隶制是不好, okay? Aristotle, he also said slavery was natural. He said two things were natural, slavery and women's inferiority. If we think slavery is unjust and not natural, then the same thing is true of the argument that women are naturally inferior to men. Just as slaves are not naturally inferior, so women are not naturally inferior. Okay? So this is his argument. Look at history. When women are given equal opportunity, then they could perform as well as men. 看历史有一些例外，虽然总体来说女性没有平等的机会，但是有时候她们有平等的机会，然后她们发展跟男性没有区别，而且有时候比男性做得更好。中国历史有没有一些例子？你们可以想象，有吗？20世纪之前，有没有一些？你们想象有没有一些诗人？你说诗人吗？啊？山东人，对不对？对，这是一个很好的例子，对不对？有一些诗人，他们非常好，对不对？跟那还有什么？还有别的例子吗？OK， 他的贡献是什么？
就是花木兰她当时是替父从军，就是她的家庭里面就是后来就是有杨家将嘛，就是他们整个家庭很多都是女性去从军，而且取得了很大的成就。
对，所以他们有平等机会当军，他们也做得非常好，对不对？
对。
包括刚才说的诗人。So the point is that if women are given equal opportunities, no matter what society, they will be equals of men, maybe even better. Another point, what is natural? 什么是自然？其实不同的文化有不同的回答，不同的社会有不同的回答，对不对？我们觉得现在自然的东西就是比如说what do you consider to be natural？ 你现在觉得什么是很自然的一些东西？你觉得呢？我们什么是有一些道德是很自然的，不要有一些你们觉得这是很自然的东西，比如说什么？
比如就是养育自己的孩子。
OK， 养自己的孩子，挺好，这个意思很好，大家都觉得是很自然的。但是有一些例外，在以色列有一种制度叫 kibbutz， 这个我真的不知道怎么翻译。你可以有人可以查吗？反正 kibbutz 就是一种社群，他们怎么养孩子，不让父母管自己的孩子，应该是社群管。The community raises the children, and they don't allow their own parents to raise their own children. 他们觉得这个是更自然，而且更公平。所以，我们觉得什么是自然，什么是不自然，总是我们发现有一些例外。So 现在我们说他们会觉得，这个女性没有那么理性，这是自然的。但是不一定，对不对？不同的社会会觉得，你发现 kibbutz 怎么说吗？
它是音译，叫基布兹，或者翻译成集体农场。
OK。还有what else? What's another argument? Well, this is the conclusion. Basically, the reason why in their day, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, women were not as rational as men, it's not because of nature. 跟自然一点关系都没有，只要是教育的问题。Because they have a different education, so of course they turn out differently. Let's give women and men the same education, and then we'll find out. No differences in ability. We have tested this idea now, 100 years later, and it was proven right. We can say there is progress in philosophy And this is a clear case of progress, okay? So very important argument. Now, they also, but in their day, it was a very, 就是完全是非主流的思想，所以他们还是要说服他们的其他的学者。怎么说服他们呢？ Well, they say, if we have equality between men and women, it will benefit all of society. 对整个社会有好处。为什么呢？ This is an argument from Mill, exactly the same argument that Plato made. Okay? If women can develop their moral and intellectual ability, this will double the mass of mental faculties available to humanity, right? So of course, he's saying if you want to have a better society, which is more developed, where more people can be君子 instead of 小人，那当然我们都应该重视女性的教育 okay? This is the most important reason for society. Now meaning in their days, 18th century, 19th century, 哇，很敏感这个东西。The lack of moral and intellectual education means that women care little about the world beyond the family, which is not favorable to virtue. So, if we want women, 如果我们要推及一些关怀、一些道德，那怎么推及呢？ We have to give women the opportunity to develop, to learn about the world, and to care about the world, right? Otherwise, they only care about the family. If they only care about the family, and if they're educated to only care about the family, then you won't have half of the people in society will be indifferent to the rest of the world, and maybe even hostile. And of course, that's bad for society as a whole, right? This was the argument. So if you want to benefit society as a whole, right, 功利主义者他们觉得 the test of morality is to increase happiness for the greatest number. Of course, you should educate women as well as men, right? Now, sorry. I mean, obviously for women it's beneficial, right? Sorry. Okay. Now, obviously it benefits women to have education, to have equal opportunity. 大家都承认，但是他们要说服男性。如果我有权利的话，我不一定愿意给女性都给他们平等的机会，对不对？ So he has to, both Mary Wollstonecraft and John Stuart Mill have to persuade men that they have an interest in promoting equality between women and men. 他们怎么说服男性呢？ Well, this is a very good argument by Mary Wollstonecraft. She says, friendship is eternal, but love is transient. 友谊, well, friendship is something that is long-lasting, well, eternal. At least, typically speaking, love, at least a very passionate form of love, lasts maybe, not that long a time. But friendship lasts a very long time. Often becomes deeper and deeper with time. If your wife is not just a lover, but is a friend who you can develop intellectually in harmony with then it benefits men as well. Men should prefer to marry women who are their intellectual and moral equals. That way they could develop not just love, but develop friendship, which lasts a long time. And John Stuart Mill, of course, had this relation with his wife, Harriet Taylor. You'll recall they stayed together for about 19 years. Finally, her husband died, and then they got married. Unfortunately, she died not too long after that, but they had a very long-lasting relation based not just on love, but on friendship. So if I'm a man, it benefits me to be married to a woman who is a friend, not just a lover. 我不知道你们同意不同意？你们希望你们的老婆是什么样的人？你们觉得？等一会儿再说好吗？Another argument from John Stuart Mill. Mill, remember, he's very critical of those who blindly follow common opinion. 他是不应该盲目听这些主流的思想。这个是，如果大家都盲目听主流的思想，这个社会没办法发展。但是，如果女性没有受到很好的教育，她们一般来说都会盲目听主流的思想。So, and sometimes 他们不让，有一些男性很勇敢，他们想批评主流的思想，想发展，但是他们的媳妇儿会说：“要看，不要这么说好吗？要看我们家庭的情况，很危险。”但是如果女性受到一些教育，他们有时候会支持这些比较勇敢的男性。So in other words, this is what he means by men wouldn't be held back from pursuing higher goals by the auxiliaries of common opinion. If the woman is educated, let's say if the wife is educated, they together could develop some theories, and well, not just some theories, but some practices that challenge mainstream ways of doing things. Of course, Mill's own relation with his wife, Harriet Taylor, is a very good example of that. Okay, good. Now, for children, why does equality between men and women benefit children? 为什么对孩子们男女平等有好处呢? This is an argument that developed by Susan Muller-Oken, but also by John Stuart Mill. Basically, and this is obvious for Chinese because of the long history of viewing the family as a place where we learn about virtue, but for the West, it was a new argument. Where do we learn about virtue? 现在我们说，西方人说关怀伦理是在家庭，对不对？如果我是个小孩，然后我看，我妈妈盲目听我爸爸的话，那我会觉得，然后我会觉得这个是很正常、很自然的，所以我会觉得什么样的社会是比较不错的社会，就是有一些统治者说了算的制度 ，OK? This is what it means. If there is no equality, if the children see their parents in a very unequal relation where the father decides everything, they will think it is natural in a society to live in a society where the citizens are passive and where the rulers decide everything for them. Of course, the liberal theorists were against that, right? If you could change the family so that men and women are equal, so that the father and mother are equals, the children will learn about freedom and equality within the family. So this is a very important argument. So the point here is that equality between men and women benefits women, of course, right? Benefits men, because men could have friends, not just lovers, if they have a relation with a woman. And it benefits children, because the children would learn about freedom and equality, not about despotism and the idea that power is the way, that might is right, to use this slogan in English. Or 我们看，如果家庭是 like， 如果家庭我们会听，我们会学小孩，我们会学 法家的价值观，那他们会觉得家庭之外也应该用法家的方式来解决问题。但是如果他们会学习一些儒家的价值观、仁爱等等，那他们会觉得家庭之外也应该用仁爱来解决问题。Okay? So, if the arguments for equality between men and women are so strong, why has patriarchy been the dominant system in almost all societies, in almost all of human history? 为什么大男子主义是最普遍的现象？如果我们觉得男女平等是比较有说服力的理论，那为什么所有的社会20世纪之前都是大男子主义的社会？为什么呢？ Well, Mary Wollstonecraft has a reason. 为什么有这样的起源呢？ Because men exert their strength to subjugate their companion. Generally, it is true that men have more physical strength than women, so they can use force and power and violence to dominate women, and once they achieve dominance, they don't want to give up their power. That has happened in all societies, and that's the problem. We have to change the system. That's what they say, okay? Well, that's the origin, 这是起源。为什么是维持的？ Why was this system maintained? Well, they have an explanation as well. Because men come to believe, 当然是短期的利益。如果是长期的利益，他们应该承认男女平等对他们也有好处，因为可以变成朋友的一些关系。但是短期的利益 in the short term, men come to believe that women were created to be the toy of man, his rattle, and it must jingle in their ears whenever dismissing reason he chooses to be amused. So men come to believe, 哇，挺舒服，我说了算，我也挺开心。他们男性都觉得是他们的短期的利益是这样，对不对？哎，我需要我想吃饭，你做饭吧。然后觉得哎，短期只是我的短期的利益，但是长期的利益不应该是这样，对不对？如果我们一起做饭会更快乐，大概对不对？而且我们会做更好的东西，可能。但是短期方面，男性都觉得大男子主义是自然的制度。And women are also have a kind of false consciousness. Remember that term from Marxism? False consciousness, right? Women come to believe from their very infancy that beauty is their source of power, that the mind is shaped to the body, and that roaming in its gilt cage only seeks to adore its prison. Women come to believe that by being beautiful, by being passive, that is the source of happiness. Nothing else matters. And they come to like their prison. It's a kind of false consciousness that needs to be shaken. Okay, so it's not just men who believe that patriarchy is a good thing. It's women. 很多女性，包括现在有一些社会，你们看一些国家，女性也会觉得，我也挺开心这样的。我盲目听我老公的话，我也挺开心。他们真的开心吗？按照女性主义者，他们觉得 it's a kind of false consciousness. OK， 我们休息一会儿，然后我们看当代的女性主义者怎么讲问。